Hello human beings, PowerGamer here. Recently I was talking to this guy who tried to kill me a few years ago, and he said he needed my help to build a bomb so he could stop an earthquake. Obviously I should trust him, right?
Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back.
Spoilers.
The highly anticipated sequel for the orange marsupial, Crash Bandicoot 2 was one of the most popular games of its generation, and that's saying a lot given its competition. Development started in October of 1996, a few months after the first game came out. Naughty Dog wanted to enhance the experience by adding much more emphasis on the game's environments and adding small details that weren't in the original game. Although interestingly, one of those features, being fog, was removed due to many games at the time being criticized for using fog as a way of hiding their imperfections. The game utilized a totally new engine, which allowed for it to run much faster than the last one. The developers clearly learned from their previous experience and wanted to use their knowledge to the fullest. They also switched out Crash's girlfriend, Tawna, for a sister named Coco, since Sony Computer Entertainment Japan apparently felt uncomfortable with a quote-unquote super sexy character alongside Crash.
This is Japan we're talking about, right?
Cortex Attacks Rear was released for the PlayStation 1 on November 6, 1997, only a little over a year after the first game was released, which is really impressive for the time period. It did much better than the first game, both commercially and critically. It sold over 7.5 million copies, making it the 7th best-selling PS1 game ever, and it was lauded as a vast improvement over its predecessor. To this day, people regard it as the best game in the original Crash Bandicoot trilogy, and by extension, the best in the series.
And while I don't personally agree with that, I do remember Crash 2 being a really fun game. I've been itching to return to the Insane trilogy for a while, so let's take another look at our favorite friend from down under.
The story picks up right after the end of the first game, or the ending where Crash destroyed Cortex's ship, not the one where he flew away with Tawna. Cortex crashes underground where he discovers this glowing purple crystal. We then cut to him in a space station along with his new assistant, Dr. N-Jin, because I guess he and Brio had a falling out. N-Jin says that in order to awaken the full power held in the master crystal Cortex found, they must collect a bunch of smaller crystals. But since Cortex is out of minions, he decides to turn to an enemy instead. We then see Crash napping on the beach alongside his sister, Coco Bandicoot. Where did Coco come from? And how are they related if Crash was one of 2 bandicoots created by Cortex? Well, I can answer that question with the same answer I give to what happened to Tawna.
I don't know.
Coco asks Crash to get her a new battery for her laptop, leading to a small tutorial level on the beach. Crash then gets abducted and taken to this warp room. A hologram of Cortex tells him that the world is in great danger and he needs Crash's help to stop it by collecting the power of the crystals, and Crash just goes along with it because he is very dumb. But I ain't that stupid. I'm not getting these crystals. I'm just gonna ignore them.
No, Crash. I said bring me the crystals! Now, get back in there.
Alright, fine, looks like I can't do that. However, if you collect a gem, you get a message from N. Brio, who warns you that Cortex can't be trusted. He tells Crash that if he collects all the gems, Brio will be able to destroy Cortex's space station. And that's about it. You have to go through the levels and collect crystals while Brio's minions try to stop you, and Cortex occasionally chimes in, along with Coco, who tries to warn Crash that something is wrong. The story's very simple, but it's also kinda dumb. I feel like it could have been better if they made it a little bit more vague about who to trust, Cortex or Brio, since both were villains in the last game. But from the very beginning, we can see that Cortex is the bad guy and has ulterior motives. Hell, the title of the game gives it away. But I guess it doesn't really matter, since Crash Bandicoot isn't something you play for the story anyway. At least we have a bit more focus, and again, this was the game that introduced Coco to the series. Despite her confusing origins, she is a welcome addition, since unlike her brother, she's highly intelligent and honestly pretty adorable.
Now the presentation for the remaster was roughly the same as it was last time, but for the original, it was a huge improvement.
The graphics had a lot more detail, and the model quality was much higher. Plus, this game has a lot more voice acting than the last one, and it's pretty good for 1997. Remember, this was the same year that gave us this.
What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets. But enough talk. How about you?
And like I said about Crash 1, the remaster is a huge upgrade. The game looks gorgeous, except for the occasional awkward lighting, and the more prevalent story shows just how much of an upgrade we got for the character animations. They have so much personality, and it is wildly entertaining. But the one thing that's a step up in both versions is the soundtrack. I love the music in Crash 2. It sounds so good, and there's so much variety in here. Whether you're listening to the original or the remaster, all of these songs sound amazing. For the actual gameplay, it doesn't change all too much. Once again, you're placed in a linear stage and have to reach the end of the area while breaking unlocking as many boxes as possible. You collect Wumpa Fruit for extra lives, Crash dies in one hit unless you have an Aku Aku mask, and you kill enemies by jumping and spinning. But thankfully, the developers remembered that the circle button is indeed a thing, so Crash has not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 new abilities. Holding the button lets you crouch, allowing you to jump higher. Holding it and moving makes you crawl, which can let you go through crevices. Yeah, this isn't that great. If you press it in the air, you do a belly flop, which is honestly kind of situational and occasionally gets me killed. And if you press it while running, you can slide. The slide is fantastic. Not only does it serve as another way to take out enemies, but if you jump right after, you can greatly increase your height and distance. If you don't jump, it can be a little awkward since you'll immediately start crawling, but the slide jump is a great way to avoid certain obstacles and reach new areas.
The slide jump is a fantastic addition to this game, and it really helps since this game goes a lot crazier with the level designs.
Instead of a world map, Crash 2 has you navigate the Warp Room, which serves as the main hub. I'll admit this does make the game feel less like a coherent adventure, but overall, I vastly prefer the hub world. Not only is it easier to navigate because of how small it is, making revisiting areas much easier, but since you're entering portals, this gives the game freedom to do all sorts of unique level themes. You've got forest levels, ruins, snow, labs, sewers, all kinds of stuff you never saw in the first game. Not to mention, you can play the levels in any order you want, as long as you're on the right floor. They really shake up the formula by having all these new themes, as well as new vehicle levels. The first game had a couple of levels where you ride a pig, but here you can ride Puller the polar bear, which is basically the same thing, only he controls much better, can speed up, and he's absolutely adorable. Aww, look at the little guy. I'm sorry I have to do this to you, buddy, but I need those extra lives. There's also a wave board that lets you ride on water, and a jetpack that's an absolute mess. Okay, the controls themselves aren't that bad, but the control scheme is awful. The joystick moves you up and down, and the shoulder buttons move you forward and back, when it should really be the other way around. And we get even more levels where Crash runs towards the camera instead of against it.
They really upped the variety in this game with the levels, but that is nothing compared to the increased number of secrets.
While Crash 1 had one main collectible, this one has two, the crystals and the gems. The crystals are required to beat the game, but they are not hard to find at all. 90% of them are found on the direct paths, and you'll have to deliberately avoid not picking them up to miss them. There are a couple that you might miss if you aren't careful, but for the most part you should find them naturally as you play. The gems, on the other hand, work the same and differently. Once again, each level has a set number of boxes to break, and if you smash all of them, you're rewarded with a gem. We have all the same types of boxes from before, but there are two new ones. These steel boxes that require a belly flop to destroy, and that's it, and the highly unstable nitro boxes, which are TNT on steroids. Just touching them makes them explode instantly. You want to avoid them as much as possible until you find this metal box that's tinted green, which causes all of the nitro boxes in the level to explode, and yes, this is mandatory for the box gem. There's still bonus levels that feel the same, but there's no tokens to collect this time. Just hop on the platform and you can access them no problem. But this game added a bunch of other gems too. There's once again 5 colored gems that later serve as platforms, but instead of replacing the clear gems for the boxes, you now have to complete an additional challenge to collect them. Most of the time they're hidden in an extra path, but some require something a little more complicated. In addition to those, there's a bunch of extra clear gems. These require you to beat some sort of challenge, like beating the level under a time limit or following a different path. One of the most common types are these death route platforms, which only appear if you reach them without dying. These take you to an extra area with a much harder platforming challenge to complete, and you're always rewarded with a gem. Most of them aren't that bad, but the ones that have boxes in them, meaning you have to do these in order to get the box gem in addition to the rest of the level, is really frustrating. But it's all worth it because this game introduced us to the sheer majesty that is the Crash Dance, which he does every time you get a gem. The Insane Trilogy changed it a bit by making these pelvic thrusts more of a shuffle, but regardless, the dance is absolutely delightful every time you see it. Alright, fine.
There, I did the dance. You happy?
There's even some secret areas you can find if you get to the entrance. Crash 1 had a couple of secret levels like this, but these ones are not only secret levels, but additional paths on levels you've already played by allowing you to collect more gems. Some of these secrets can be hard to spot, but others actually make a bit of sense if you think about them. Like, why is this platform here? Why is there a staircase of nitro boxes in this level? And thankfully, the Insane Trilogy can give you some hints. I really like a lot of the new collectibles this game adds, but it sadly leads to this game's biggest issue, the camera. A lot of the levels have branching paths, and because the camera doesn't turn around, it can be insanely frustrating since you won't always know what's coming. Now, in levels where you're always going forward, the camera is scaled back a bit, so you always have a better view of what's ahead. But in the other levels, nope. You just have to move slowly and try your best to not run into a hazard you couldn't see until it was too late. And since you've likely broken most of the checkpoint boxes, it can be insanely frustrating to constantly lose progress, and it drains your lives fast.
The only upside I can think of is that they added a lot of new death animations in this game, and yeah, a lot of them are hilarious. While this game isn't as unfair as Crash 1, it still has some really annoying moments.
A bunch of the levels have really tight platforming, some of the boxes can be hidden in really stupid locations, and a lot of levels are impossible to backtrack in. Sometimes the slide jump just doesn't work because you pressed it half a second too late, and good lord, I absolutely hate this game's ice physics. It takes too much force to get going if you need to move quickly, and your momentum carries over way too much. If you hit something and then jump, you keep going even when you're not pressing anything. This is insanely annoying, and the ice levels are easily some of the worst ones in the game. Honestly, while I did much better on my second playthrough with Crash 1 than on my first one, this one I ended up doing much worse. I got way more game overs in this game than when I first played it, and I have no idea why. Thankfully, we have some quality of life improvements from the first game, at least in the original version. The jumping physics were made to be a lot less awkward, you can save the game at any time as opposed to needing to beat bonus levels, and you can die and still get the box gem. That isn't important for the remaster, but I still felt like I should mention it. Like with the first game, the Unseen Trilogy tweaked the jumping physics a bit, which is helpful for the most part, but it can make some parts more frustrating, although it's not as drastic of a change as it was for the first game. We have a bunch of hints in the loading screens, which can be really helpful, and it adds both Coco being playable and time trials for each level.
There's 5 levels on each floor and 5 floors total, so that gives us 25 total levels that we need to beat.
The first one is Turtle Woods, a dense forest level with 3 moments you have to kill these moles to make a bouncy mushroom spawn. It also holds the blue gem, and to get it, you need to beat the level without breaking a single box. I love you, Insane Trilogy. Next is Snow Go, our first ice level. It's nothing too special. You got seals, spinning penguins, and terrible ice physics, plus these giant pillars that crush you. There's also the red gem, but we can't get it until later. Hang 8, you move up this river while avoiding piranha plants. You have to ride this waterboard, and if you beat the level before this timer ends, you get an extra gem. The Pits, another forest level, and our first example of branching paths and how annoying they can be. It is so hard to avoid most of these things when you're going backwards. I hate this level. Crash Dash, our first chase level where you run from a giant boulder. This reminds me of a movie or something. What was it called again? Oh, right, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. You also have to avoid these mines that don't kill you, but they do stop you for a second. Now we fight our first boss, Ripper Roo, who's now become a therapist. You don't actually fight him. He bounces around spawning TNT and nitro boxes, and you have to avoid them until he kills himself. Second floor has Snow Biz. It's just a harder version of Snow Go. Air Crash. It's a harder version of Hang 8, but it has a death route platform and a secret exit on this platform. This takes you to the basement, letting you find an extra path in Snow Go, which holds the red gem. Barrett, our first polar riding level. Like I said, it's basically the same as the hog riding, only better controls, and you can dash. Crash Crush. It's another boulder chase level, only they add dash panels that speed you up and electric gates you have to slide under. The Eel Deal is a sewer level, lovely, where you have to avoid these toxic waste barrels and robots. Plus these eels electrify the water, so you need to jump on these platforms. There's also a bunch of branching paths, and if you go through this fake wall, you find the green gem. The next boss is the Komodo brothers, who are really easy. One throws swords, the other spins. Wait for the spinning one to get dizzy, and then spin him into the other one.
I think this is the only boss fight where you actually hurt them directly.
Third floor, Plant Food. It's another river level with the same timer thing as before, only this one gives you the yellow gem. Sewer or Later. It's another sewer level, but with a secret path that gives you an extra gem. Bear Down, another polar riding level, only much harder. Road to Ruin. You're placed in these ruins where you have to avoid jumping lizards and monkeys, crumbling platforms, fire statues, and Donkey Kong ripoffs. And again, you have to come back later. Unbearable. It's another chase level, only instead of a boulder, it's this giant polar bear. Good lord! There's a secret area with this undestroyed bridge, and it ends with you riding polar again. And if you run back to him, you'll find a secret level. The floor's boss is Tiny Tiger, and it's easily the best fight in the game. You hop on these platforms that go down, and he follows your every move. You want to make it so he jumps on a platform after it falls, which hurts him. It's honestly a really cool fight. Fourth floor, Hanging Out, another sewer level, but this one has a secret path that leads to Road to Ruin. Digging It is a level covered in dirt. It has more brown than a mud factory on chilly day. You can dig underneath these dirt patches, and you need to avoid spinning plants and these annoying bees. Getting the box gem is a pain since there is a death route with boxes and so many branching paths. The bees just come out of freaking nowhere. There's also a portal on this tiny island. Up next is Cold Hard Crash.
This is the worst level in the whole fucking game.
It is miserable. It's another ice level with a death route platform that is complete bullshit. You have to slide on ice through crushing pillars and nitro boxes that are so fucking hard to avoid, hit this metal box, then go all the way back to break this one apple that reappears, and then carry on with the rest of the level. Not only do these require fucking pinpoint precision on these god-awful ice physics, it is nearly impossible to get through these without invincibility, but if you go too far and fall off the edge, you need to die and go back. And there's no checkpoint in here. You have to do it all in one go. I spent half an hour on this level, and it was horrible. Not to mention, this level likes to hide boxes, and let me tell you, there is nothing worse than going through this miserable gauntlet, only to reach the end and find out you missed it. Ruin Nation is a harder version of Road to Ruin, only it has this absurdly hard death route. Bee Having is another digging bee level, only the bees are much worse since they spawn like 5 bees instead of 1. The upside is if you kill them all, you get an extra life, so you can farm them if you're consistent on the timing, which is easier said than done. Here's the trick: slide right when the second bee spawns. If you hop on the staircase of nitro boxes, it transports you to the secret area where you get the purple gem. Boss time, Dr. N. Jin. He's in this giant robot suit, and you don't spin like normal. You throw an endless supply of Wumpa fruit at him while he shoots lasers and missiles at you. It's weird, but pretty fun. Cortex is furious about Crash attacking Engine, and we head up to the final floor. Piston it away. You run through a lab full of crushing pistons, deadly shrink rays, electric tentacle robots, and mad scientists that bounce you back. You also need to make sure not to kill this robot because you need it in order to get back to the death platform, which you have to run past in order to get all the boxes and then go back to it. Rocket, the first jetpack level. You have to fly through lasers, hot pipes, electric scientists, and tentacles. Someone's fetish is becoming much more abundant. Night fight. You have to run through this dark forest while grabbing these fireflies to light up the area. It's basically the same thing as the dark levels in the last game, only you use fireflies instead of Aku Aku, which is much better since getting hit doesn't strand you. Pack Attack. It's a harder version of Rocket. Before we get the last crystal, we need to do the secret levels. The one from Unbearable gives you Totally Bear, which is a polar level with some enormous gaps, and the one from Diggin' It gives you Totally Fly, which is a harder version of Night Fight. All that's left is Spaced Out, which is a harder and easier version of Piston It Away. The main level is harder, but there's no death route, so getting the gem is easier. But there is an extra path you can only clear if you have all 5 colored gems. The first obstacle is ridiculously hard, and I beat the rest of them on my first try. The main level is tricky, but it's not that bad. With all the crystals collected, Coco hacks in and tells Crash that Cortex is going to use them to enslave everyone on Earth, so we have to stop him. Cortex attempts to flee with the main crystal, and we have the easiest final boss in video game history. Fly through these rings on the jetpack while avoiding mines and rocks that don't actually hurt you, and spin Cortex 3 times before he gets away. It's a complete joke. Cortex flees in a space station, and Crash returns to the beach with Coco, who warns him Cortex is still out there. The credits roll, and if you collected all the gems, Brio calls in and lets you access the top floor, giving you the game's best ending. Brio, Crash, and Coco use the power of the gems to fire a giant laser that destroys Cortex's space station. A much better reward than the one from the first game. Beating the game in the Insane Trilogy also unlocks the Speed Shoes, which let you run faster and help with the time trials. Pass.
Game conquered. Crash Bandicoot 2 is a vast improvement over the first game. It has more abilities, better levels, and it's just overall way more fun to play. The backtracking can get pretty annoying, especially when going for 100% completion, but other than that, it is a high recommendation. I just really wish they fixed the ice physics in the Insane Trilogy, because I can say with absolute confidence that there is no way ice physics work like that in real life!